Okay, it is 6 o'clock, so time to get started. And we'd just like to start off by thanking all of the elementary parents, our administrators, our principals that are here. Very excited that we're all able to get together. Very excited that we could have such a good number of people able to remember these things. Sometimes I know you get in the middle of something at home and you're like, oh, doggone it, I have a meeting. So anyway, we're very glad that you could be here. And the goal of this meeting really is to provide as much information as we can regarding two things. And when I say as much information, I mean as much information as we have right now, because both of them involve decisions from both a state and federal level. And I'll talk a little more about that in just a minute. But our goal is to talk about the school finance picture. I'm sure you've heard a great deal about that, whether it's in the media or from other educators regarding the almost dire situation that we're in at this moment and trying to work through as we not only wrap up this school year, but we look at next year. So I want to talk to you about that a little bit. I am an optimist. I do believe most of the financial situation will get taken care of, but I'll talk to you about that in just a little bit. Also, obviously, something very, very important going on is programming for next year. And I want to talk about our philosophy of programming, what we are doing at this time in regards to programming to prepare for next school year. And although a very different situation, I think there's a lot of exciting things that are in the works that I think will provide with a very quality and great experience next year. Before we go any further, I'd like to introduce the people that are here and just remind you this format is probably more of a webinar type of format. I will probably do most of the talking. People also on your screen, some of them will do some talking as well to chime in. You will be able to place questions in the question spot on this Zoom meeting. And from time to time, we'll take a question, we'll answer those questions. And then if we do not get to all of them, what we're going to do is we're going to post them on our website and really start to develop a Q&A, just like we did for our bond issue, where we would list things, and when people would ask even in the future, we would add those just to make sure everyone is in the loop on what's going on. So starting off, John.
Hi, my name is John Philo. I'm an assistant superintendent in charge of human resources. For those of you that may be new to Zoom, probably are much more accustomed to it since March, down at the very bottom in the middle of your screen is the Q&A, and that should give you an opportunity to ask questions when those come up. So we'll be monitoring those as we go, and then breaking in and asking those questions of the group as we work our way forward. Okay.
Okay, Heather.
Hi, I'm Heather Iskowski, Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Business Services.
Scott.
Hi, thanks for being here, everybody. My name is Scott Merkel. I'm Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction.
Okay, and we do have some of our principals here. I don't know if everyone's on my tiles, but the ones I can see, Brian.
It's Brian Mulder. I'm the principal at West Elementary.
Okay. Dave?
Good evening, Dave Martini, principal at Cummings Elementary.
Tanya?
Hi, Tanya Shoup, principal at Century Park.
And the early childhood realm, Jennifer?
Hi, Jennifer Harper, early ed administrator.
Okay. Any other principals on that I can't see? Do you see, Walt?
Roger, we have 3 more joining. They just got locked out on the limit. Mike Gelmy over at Central, Darla England from South Elementary, and Emily McAlpine from Grandville will all be joining here in just a minute.
Okay. Well, thank you. And the guy behind the scenes that has the little, I think it's a Lego guy, I'm not sure, is Walt Keener. He is our technology coordinator. Oh, there he is. Technology coordinator for the district. Walt, you want to say hi?
Yeah, hi, I'm the technology director for the district, hopefully making the Zoom meeting tonight work smoothly, so.
Okay. So we have about an hour, so why don't we get to it? First thing I'd like to talk about is the programming side of things. And as you'll recall, in March, when we ended up going out of school, we really had to scramble. And we had to scramble because, number one, we knew that providing learning experiences for our kids is, at number one, it's their job, but number two, the value of that, we know it has to be something that goes on no matter what takes place. So honestly, we put some plans together, and for the time and for the situation, we did the best we could with the time we had. And I think overall, we did a pretty good job of providing learning experiences. But as we look ahead, as we look to fall, first of all, from a philosophical point of view, and I know that's the philosophy of the people that are on this call, are administrators, we want to be back to school more than anything. And our goal is going to be being back, having face-to-face learning, because we know that is the most effective learning that takes place. So the scenarios we're coming up with, just know the primary scenario is back to face-to-face learning. However, we know that even if the state says you can go back to all 100% face-to-face learning, we know there are circumstances, whether it be your preference in having your child stay home, you're just not ready yet for them to come back into a face-to-face environment, whether it's a student that maybe has, is medically fragile or has some medical conditions, and you're, again, just not ready for them to come back to school. We know there will be situations where there's both face-to-face learning and there will be the need for remote learning, and not the remote learning we just had. That served the time, but it needs to be more school-like. It needs to be a schedule and a learning experience that really, as best as we can, mirrors what takes place in the face-to-face learning. So that is our goal. What our message to you that we want you to know is, no matter the situation, no matter what the state says the scenario is, and there are several, there's obviously the face-to-face learning, all remote learning, and you're hearing a lot of these people talk about hybrid situations. For us, what we're going to look at doing is providing a quality Grandville education, no matter what the scenario is, no matter what you choose. But our preference is going to be 100% face-to-face learning. And then from there, we will work with you on what your preference is, and we'll customize a quality Grandville education to fit what that need is. Now, that's going to take, from the remote side, it's going to take some work over the summertime. And we currently have teams of people working. We have, first of all, a district oversight team. And that district oversight team really is looking at, they're looking at three different areas. They are really looking at program delivery. In other words, looking at the various scenarios we might be faced with, and really working to take our in-person learning experience and saying, how can we mirror this as best as possible in a remote environment? So we're taking a look at that, and then we're looking at some other options of what, as far as accommodations for kids, as far as special circumstances. And again, our support staff, our ancillary staff, they are looking at their school day that they normally have, in saying, in those support services that we provide for our students with disabilities, our ELL students, et cetera. How can we take those in-person supports and replicate them as best as possible? So that's one group that is meeting, a program delivery group. Also, there's a process, what we call process, procedures, and PPE group. And that's really the how we will do school as we look ahead. Obviously, there are a lot of guidelines out there. As a matter of fact, I think there are too many guidelines out there, different groups coming out with guidelines. But as we get closer and as the summer moves on, we have a subgroup, a team really working on the process of school. So we'll be following those guidelines along the way this summer. And we'll be saying, how does that pertain to Grandville elementary schools and how they function? So you're hearing a lot of ideas out there. You're hearing a lot of schools around the world that have maybe gone back to school, such as Denmark, that are trying different things. And at this point, there's no clear cut, this is the way it ought to be. Obviously, we're going to minimize. We're number one, we have to have a safe school and a safer school than we've ever had as far as, hygiene and as far as disinfecting and so on. And you'll see that take place in, over time in that plan. It'll be a pretty robust plan. As far as masks and things like that, I think that's yet to be determined. And I think things have really changed over, just from last month to this month have changed a great deal. So who knows how much things are going to change in a matter of a couple months. But we are studying the guidelines. We'll continue to follow the guidelines as they morph and as things hopefully start to open up more and more like they have been recently. And we'll see where that goes. But again, in a nutshell, we are going to have safer schools than we've ever had because we have to. I mean, as far as cleanliness goes, we are, when in doubt, we're gonna over sanitize. We're gonna have look at times even periodically through the school day that we'll be focusing on certain procedures and processes that will happen with that. And the third phase, or the third subgroup we have, is a group called Innovation Technology, and that's really making sure that the platforms for a remote environment work well, that we have, people have access when they need access, devices. We're very fortunate that some time ago, our district, passed a technology bond for one-to-one devices. And obviously it was very easy, or easier for us than most, to be able to go to a remote learning type of experience. But we do know there are students still without access. So how do we get them access should they need it? Again, is another important part. And in a remote learning experience, we already know what we're going to be teaching and when in regards to what our teachers do. That's the thing in person that we do. But how we take that and what platform or what way do we replicate that that's best for kids, that's another part of the Innovation Technology group. So 3 main groups, and we have a district group that is that really is overseeing that. Also, the ISD has a group that is primarily doing, creating recommendations for those situations. And I also sit on that group as well. And a lot of the discussions are similar. No matter where you go, everyone is really, really looking at those. I think what might separate us, though, is, we are doing, we know you value a Grandville education. We know you send your kids here because of the quality education, because of the fantastic teachers and staff that we have. And what we would rather do, instead of look at some online program and say, here's your remote part, we want to replicate as best as we can a quality Grandville education. So that's what we'll be doing this summer. If things don't change significantly, I do see us coming back to school. I don't know how that looks, how the state, will say we can come back with their guidelines. But I believe we're going to be able to be back to face-to-face learning unless we have a major flare up or change, considering the way things are going. They've been going pretty positive in that direction. So that's what we want, and that's the best education that we provide. If it weren't, we would have been doing other things before this in that world. But please know that a remote learning experience here, our goal is to make it as Grandville-like as possible, not some other online program that doesn't have our people and doesn't have our curriculum. During the school day, we anticipate a schedule. If a kid is in a remote learning environment, a schedule just like the schedule we have at school. So not only does the curriculum mirror each other, but the schedule also does. So, the classes will move along, they'll start at the same time, and the subject areas and so on will move along as those subject areas do. Why is it important for them to mirror each other? It's very important because in this situation, when you're looking at what's best for our kids, there may be kids back and forth. Let me give you a couple scenarios. Let's say we start school in person, and then 2 months into school, there's a flare up, in Michigan, and all of a sudden we're out of school again. We can't take the time that we did last time to develop a remote learning plan. We have to be ready to go that next day, or if it's a Friday, we got to be ready to go on Monday. And it's important that if the what kids are learning and when they're learning it is the same, it'll be very important that they're able just to transition right to that remote learning experience and not miss a beat in what they've been learning about. Same thing if I'm I'm in remote learning, and let's say that as a parent I say I'm just not comfortable yet. I want my child to be in a remote experience, and then let's say a month in I change my mind and I'm ready for my son to be in school. It's going to be, again, very important that my son can transition from that remote learning experience into what's going on in class. Anybody that's moved before, you probably understand that, how you go from a building to one district to another, let's say, and things can be very different in what kids are learning. You might go, well, gee, my kid already learned this 2 months ago, and you're just starting it. So that can cause some transition issues. And so we're trying to, as best as possible, make sure that both mirror each other so that if kids have to move in and out of situations, that they're able to. So that is really, in a nutshell, that's what we're preparing for the fall. We are currently, our staff, what they are doing, we have groups of people that are taking, say, their third grade curriculum that they teach in person, and they're making sure that is consistently mapped out throughout the district, what kids are learning when they're learning it. And then they're going to get together with our technology innovation people, and we're going to create the remote learning setting that mirrors that as best as we possibly can. So that's what will be going on. What I would say to you as a parent, and I already mentioned, no matter what the situation, that our goal is having that quality Grandville education. That is why we're mirroring these two as best as we possibly can. But there will come a point, and I would say more than likely it'll be mid to late July, where we're going to try to set up times to talk to parents of every individual kid and have that discussion about what you're looking for, what you're considering in regards to next year's learning experience. And that will help us for that last part of July and August, make sure that our plans are appropriate. When we know how many kids will be in a remote setting, or if we know your student, let's say, has an IEP and there are certain support services, but your student's not going to be here, then we want to be able to customize that, set up a schedule where if they need, let's say, OT, PT services, we're able to work with you together to figure out how that's going to happen, how we can make that happen. You know, another big part of this, and you know, as we look at the in-person part to us is so important because, you know, situations are different, and we know there are many of you out there who may have to go, you know, you're going to work and you can't be at home. If you're at home and it works for you and you're all about it, great. But if you're somebody that works, we know a lot of people, their decision of getting back to work really is going to be in part due to how your son or daughter's schedule is too. So we are considering that as well. So
Hey, Roger, one
from the programming side, any questions to take?
Yeah, there's one that I think kind of mirrors and helps in where you are. Question is, when will you be making the final decision on 100% full-time in school versus hybrid? So maybe we have to address that a little bit.
The first thing that has to happen, we do not control that. It's what we want, but it's not what we control. The state has to tell us that we're able to do that. And I'm hearing right now, I know the governor has different levels, level 3, level 4, level 5. Right now, I think full back to school sits in level 5, but I am hearing from the legislation that they are looking at that going back to the level 4 of things that can be done and not done. I believe, what are we at now? Are we on a 4, 3 or a 4? I think we're at a 4. So if we're at a level 4 now, and that were the case, we would be able to look at that and consider it. Again, it's not going back to school as your son or daughter might have last year. It's going to look different. It's I mean, from a sanitizing, cleanliness, and so on, there will be a lot of protocols in place that will have to be sure and want to be sure are in place to make sure those buildings are safer than they've ever been in that area. I would anticipate, when we talk to you around mid, second, third week of July, we should have a pretty good idea of where we're sitting. The crazy thing about this scenario or situation, though, is that, we can't have a major relapse where all of a sudden the state says, sorry, we're, going back to stay at home or what have you. That obviously would be a game changer for us. But the way things seem to be trending, seem to be going, I think it all points to us having a back to school experience with some variation, of course, on our end, and with, the choice of parents and what they want to do. We're not going to just say, well, you have to be back to school or we've got nothing for you. We will have a quality Grandville education in a remote learning environment. Look very different than what it did your last 2 months you had. That was more to provide learning experiences. And the executive order we were under really was a game changer for us in what we could do and couldn't do in regards to grades and a variety of other things that the executive order said we couldn't do at that time. But this will be this will be school, whether you're in person, your son or daughter's in person or remote.
And then another one, just based on timing, similar style of question, but it's more specific to Treehouse. Wondering if we have a time frame for when Treehouse childcare will get going.
Yes, very good question. We are hoping after the 4th of July, we have a July 6th date where we're trying to look at childcare. We're currently looking at community ed programs, other programs we have for kids throughout the summer. And again, looking at the process, procedures of those, how we can stay within the current guidelines that are out there and do those things successfully. So we are really targeting after the 4th of July to start some things up, and Treehouse would be one of them.
So we've had a lot of questions recently related to masks, related to sick leave policies, related to busing and what our plan is for busing. And my group is dealing with the PPE, the protections, and the policy pieces. We've been meeting for the last 3 weeks and are continuing. And our plan, right as we're building it, our plan includes screening and how we might be able to screen and how do we expedite a screening process. What do we do if we know that there's a sick child? How do we identify when there's a sick child at the school? What happens if there's a sick child at the school? And those are all things that we're in the midst of developing in conjunction with the CDC and the health department and with guidance from the state. So we don't have all of those answers at this moment, simply because we're waiting on the state, the CDC, and the health department to give us some guidance in how that might look. But know that we will definitely have that information out well before school starts, and we will align with the CDC recommendations and the health department recommendations. Related to busing, right now, the number of kids we can have on the bus would be even difficult if we were in a hybrid model with half of our kids. So frankly, we're hoping that that gets opened up a little bit between now and August, but we're planning for the worst in that situation as well. So I wish I had great answers for some of those specific questions. We just don't have them at this point because we're still digging in and trying to figure out how do you screen, if it's half the students at the high school, 900 kids at the high school, 450 kids at the elementary school, and do that in a way that gets kids into the school and gets them learning as quickly as possible. So it's a big hurdle to try to jump, and we're up to the task, but it's going to take us a little bit of time.
One of the things with busing too, and I hope you're open to this, we may really need your help in that area, because I mean, you're talking one kid every other seat according to the latest guidelines that I heard. And again, it doesn't mean that won't change over time as things hopefully continue to improve and so on. But what we may ask you to do is, hey, if you don't mind bringing your child in, and oh, by the way, if you have a neighbor next door and you could bring them in too, we greatly appreciate it. You know, if the financial landscape, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is better, we might even try to compensate some people something to do that. I don't know if we'll be able to. I don't even know if we can do that. But we really will need your help, because if we had to run waves of buses, we'd be busing all morning and all afternoon to take them back home. So, and I hope I don't sound, I mean, I know I'm kind of chuckling at it. You either laugh or you cry about some of those challenges right now, because we don't have enough information and we don't know where we'll be. But I know this community would come together. I'm sure there are a lot of elementary people who would help get kids in for the sake of not having to do wave of buses, which would stagger times for kids to get in school. So that is one of the biggest challenges right now that every district, every superintendent that I talk to around our area is looking at, is how in the world are we going to make that happen? But I think there are some ways, and I think together we might all be able to come up with some good plans for that. So stay tuned.
And then
any other questions there, John, for now?
Yeah, there's a not a theme, but a couple of questions. I'm just scrolling through them. Just clarifying the online only option for families, the clarity in and around, well, if a student or a family chooses to be remote exclusively, will that be an option and available for them? Can they choose to be under the hybrid model if it's a hybrid model? Obviously, we're not really sure what that looks like yet from the state, but we're planning for it. But just talking about that choice piece, and how do we address that?
Yes, and the answer is yes. If you wanted to be fully remote, you could be fully remote. And like I said, it'll be a school experience. It won't be what your child experienced before. I mean, we'll have a schedule just like the school schedule. The different subject areas, the things that happen laid out in a remote format for them. So yes, that'll be there. If they're certain circumstances for a hybrid type model that you want to do, we certainly